delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I'm greatly honored to welcome you to Nairobi City County and to this very important conference. I urge you to feel welcome and at home in our city.
We welcome all of you to Nairobi, to the second Africa Climate Smart Agriculture Forum. This is a forum that was instituted by the heads of states and governments through a decision made in 2014. The first edition was held last year in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
The African Climate Smart Alliance is a joint effort by African stakeholders to bridge this gap between the Paris Agreement and the needs of the farmers in the field. You are faced with the task of turning climate challenges into opportunities for action. Norway is a partner to the Global Alliance for Climate Smart Agriculture. And during this year's annual meeting of the Global Alliance, it was evident that Africa is the leading continent on having a joint effort to combat climate change.
Africa is on the rise, and so is African agriculture. And to safeguard this through climate change, the challenges, they need to be addressed. They need to be addressed now and today, and that's why we are all here.
This forum provides an opportunity for African member states to set out an approach towards their INDCs that could provide economic and development opportunities, which include showing that agricultural growth is compatible with low carbon and climate resilient pathways. In less than a week, that is on the 16th to be precise, 16th October 2016, the world will be marking the World Food Day under the theme, Climate is Changing. Food and agriculture must also change. This will be a time to reflect on the impact of climate change on food security and the need for transformation of agriculture to address this challenge.
We all know that climate change represents one of the greatest environmental and social and economic threats facing us today. And it is a threat to the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals that were signed last year, as well as Agenda 2063 of the African Union. The bulk of the agricultural systems in Africa are highly climate and weather dependent, with more than 95% of farmland growing crops relying on rain-fed agriculture. So obviously, that is the reason why we just cannot ignore the change in weather patterns that we are seeing. Most African countries in Africa are already suffering from food insecurity due to low productivity because of degraded lands, drought, floods, and a lack of effective water management systems, among other factors. Despite these pronounced challenges, climate change also represents significant opportunities for the accelerated and inclusive growth and socioeconomic transformation in Africa, particularly within the agriculture and rural development space. Indeed, almost all African countries have included agriculture and climate-smart agriculture in their adaptation targets in their NDCs.
The relationship between agriculture and climate change, while posing challenges, also offers some of the most critical opportunities for Africa to not just advance sustainable economic growth, but also ensure that such economic growth is directly impacting on livelihood factors. These factors include increased jobs and economic opportunities for our people, especially women and the youth.
Look at the technologies, look at the financing, look at the innovations and the knowledge management capacities that are required to support this sector. And in this regard, I would like to give assurance that the NEPAD Kenya Secretariat is ready to work with all the stakeholders in order to make a difference in this sector.
And our member states in particular coming together and working as a group to make sure that their impact is felt or was felt during the negotiation. And I think we can all agree that Africa coming together, working together, and having a common African position made Africa a remarkable force during the Paris negotiation. And I think we can all argue that it had an impact in the final outcomes of the negotiation.
Now, in agriculture and development specifically, the African Union has prioritized smallholders. And in agriculture, you can talk about, yes, the farmers, smallholder farmers, but it's the whole SMEs, small, medium enterprises across the board. And it's not because of you feel pity for them, but it's because it's appreciated that if the continent has to go forward, the energy, the resource, the effort to go forward is actually in that space.
Rule 6 of the Malabo Declaration speaks emphatically on resilience and response to shocks. And the Malabo Declaration puts a figure of 30% households that should be resilient to the risk of climate change as well as other resilience issues.
Because climate is a global concern, it touches everybody, big or small. It touches every stakeholder, strong or weak. Even the greatest countries in the world cannot handle climate issues alone.
You will find that the research on climate change or all these technical issues, they are full of terminologies that the ordinary farmers, they don't understand. So we make sure that we simplify it into messages and sometimes into languages that they can resonate with and they can have confidence when they go out there displaying them or talking about them.
A lot of young people across Africa that are doing a lot when it comes to CSA. But like I said earlier, some don't even have access to information for them to know that this is what they are doing. So the time has also come for us to have like a blueprint. We can undertake have a database to identify who these young people are, what exactly are they doing to promote CSA. And one thing I realized that we can do, which is what the Cadep Youth Network has also already started with AIC, first is to look at the entry points. One entry point is the Cadep. Cadep provides a huge entry point for the young people through the non-state actors platform, also through the various networks that exist at the right level.
It's very, very important to have more women speaking about climate smart agriculture and more men talking about gender and climate smart agriculture. We need more male champions because it's not simply about sheep and goats for women. This is about shifting the power dynamic at all levels in the way we deliver support, incentives, services and rewards to women as well as men involved in agriculture.
Within the Southern African region, certain countries in the past few years, countries such as Zambia, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Lesotho, Botswana, have been spearheading practices at farmer level that are strongly anchored on climate smart agriculture actions. So already when we're talking about farming practices that are CSA oriented, they are already existing in the majority of the Southern African region.
I'm a lawyer by profession, but I'm also a farmer. So we have a project called the Youth Farm Project. The idea behind the project is also an adopted project of AIC, Cadep Youth Network. The idea is to get young people into agriculture. So within it, we train young people on agribusiness. We also train them on climate smart agriculture.
We're doing. The important questions we've got to consider here is the question of financing. As just others have talked about, we are talking about a problem of financing because after these workshops, after these meetings of dialogue and conversation, we've got to go to the practical phase and concretely how we are going to implement activities.